She wasn't supposed to be in the garage. Just a 9-year-old chasing a runaway ball. But when Lacey looked up and pointed, the entire biker club froze. There's a camera up there. What she found would unravel a plan to destroy their home and expose the man who planted it. What would you do if a child spotted what everyone else missed? Started with a dare. Lacey Worthington was 9 years old, fast on her feet and even faster with her eyes. She and 2 other kids had been playing a chaotic version of tag that involved a half-deflated rubber ball, 1 mud puddle, and a lot of shouting at the edge of Hawthorne Park. The kind of summer evening that smelled like cut grass and sounded like freedom. That's when Owen, older and annoying, kicked the ball too hard. It bounced once, smacked the sidewalk, and rolled straight into the open garage of the Iron Jaws Motorcycle Club. "Guess that ball's gone forever," he muttered, turning away. But Lacey didn't. She looked toward the wide bay doors, open like a mouth, revealing rows of gleaming bikes lined up inside. Tanks polished to mirrors, leather saddlebags slung low, helmets hung neatly on wall pegs. The garage buzzed with soft music and the occasional clink of metal from somewhere deeper in. A place for grown-ups, obviously. A place kids weren't supposed to go. But she took a step anyway. Then another. Inside, the temperature dropped. The smell shifted, motor oil, leather, coffee, and something faintly sweet. The kind of smell that stuck to denim and made people's voices drop an octave. No one stopped her. She found the ball nestled under a workbench and was about to leave when something above caught her eye. She tilted her head. Froze. A wooden ceiling beam stretched across the length of the garage. Dust clung to it like fur. But right above the office door, there was a patch that didn't match. A circle, slightly lighter, suspiciously clean. And nestled in the center of that patch was something small, round, and black. "There's a camera up there," she said aloud. 3 grown men in black leather vests turned at once. One of them, a broad man with a gray beard and eyes like wet asphalt, raised an eyebrow. "We don't do spy movies here, sweetheart." But Lacey didn't laugh. She stepped forward, pointing. "It's real. See how the dust breaks around it? Someone touched it recently. That part's clean." Silence swallowed the room. "Randy," said a taller man from the back. "Get the ladder." Grumbling but curious, old man Randy dragged out a folded ladder from behind the tool racks and climbed up slowly, a flashlight clamped in his teeth. He reached the beam, squinted, then muttered a single word, "Damn." Within minutes, the garage had changed. The bikes were pushed to one side. A workbench was cleared. Randy had removed the tiny black camera from its hiding place, no bigger than a quarter, with a wire spliced into the overhead power strip. But the shocking part wasn't the device itself. It was the light. "It's live," Randy said. "Red LED. Still transmitting." Dean McCrae, the club president, stepped into the room from his office. A tall man with sun-creased skin and hands like steel hooks. He took one look at the camera and said nothing, just stared. Then he turned to one of the younger bikers. "Get Gary." Within 20 minutes, Lacey's dad pulled up in his truck. Gary Worthington wasn't the kind of man who talked much. He'd done electrical work in nearly every building in town, some legal, some less so, but he knew his way around wires better than he did people. His hair was thinning, his shirt tucked in too tight, and he kept glancing at Lacey like he wasn't sure whether to scold her or thank her. He took one look at the device and frowned. "This isn't one of yours?" Dean asked. "Nope," Gary said, kneeling by the table. He gently cracked open the casing, revealing a miniature circuit board and a relay antenna tucked against the plastic shell. "This thing's not old. Probably installed in the last 2 weeks. Wireless transmission. Strong signal. Might be bouncing off a nearby relay or private server." "You can trace it?" Dean asked. Gary hesitated. "Maybe, but not tonight. I'll need gear from my shop, and someone who can help me lift those ceiling panels." Dean looked at Randy, then at Lacey. "You really just spotted it?" he asked. Lacey nodded. "The dust gave it away." He let out a low whistle, then smiled, a rare thing by the looks of it. "You got good eyes, Eagle Eye." She blinked. "Is that my name now?" "Sure is." And just like that, the bikers moved around her with a quiet respect. Someone handed her a hot chocolate, too sweet, full of marshmallows. Another pulled out an old club patch and pinned it to her hoodie, upside down. Means you're probationary, Randy grunted. Can't wear it straight until you prove yourself. Lacey smiled so hard her cheeks hurt. Gary packed the camera in silence, jaw tight. Not from anger, but from the weight of what it meant that his daughter saw what he hadn't. When Dean clapped a hand on his shoulder and asked, "You good to help us dig into this?" He didn't hesitate, just nodded once. Back in the truck, driving home with Lacey beside him and the case sitting between them, Gary finally spoke. "You know you shouldn't have gone in there, right?" "I know. And you know I'm proud of you, right?" She turned, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "You saw something no one else did. Doesn't matter how old you are. That counts." They sat in silence for a beat. Then Lacey whispered, "Dad, do you think someone's really trying to hurt them?" Gary stared at the road. "I don't know, honey. But if someone's watching, it means they're planning something." Behind them, in the garage now silent again, Dean stood alone by the empty beam, fingers brushing the dust. He remembered the face of someone from long ago, a kid who once helped him rebuild an engine with nothing but scrap and a dream, and he knew exactly where to start looking. The next morning, the air above Hawthorne Park shimmered with heat. Inside the Iron Jaws garage it was cooler but tense. Gary stood on a ladder, his sleeves rolled up, coaxing wires through the ceiling panel. He'd been there since sunrise, installing a sweep tool of his own design, a discreet handheld device meant to detect hidden frequencies and power leaks. Around him, bikers moved with unfamiliar precision. What started as a tight-knit brotherhood had turned into something closer to a task force. Dean watched from the corner, silent as always. "Got anything yet?" he finally asked. Gary exhaled and wiped his forehead. "Nothing new. No other cams inside. But I'm triangulating where that first one was sending data. Signal strength was high. It didn't need to go far." "Local?" Gary nodded. "Definitely." That's when Lacey walked in. She held a tablet under one arm, gripping it awkwardly like it was heavier than it was. Someone had made her a vest out of an old bandana stitched with the Iron Jaws logo. It didn't fit and the print was crooked, but she wore it like armor. "You guys use Duck Search?" she asked. Everyone stared. "What?" said Randy. "It's a search crawler. Doesn't store cookies. I read about it on a forum. I searched for weird signal reports online. Places where connections showed up but didn't belong there." She turned the screen toward Gary. "Right here, just east of the garage. That's where the signal bounced to." Gary blinked, then smiled faintly. That's good, Lace." Dean leaned over the tablet. "You sure this is accurate? Give me a ride and I'll show you." 5 minutes later, Lacey and Dean were cruising slowly down a back alley on his Softail. She sat stiffly behind him, gripping the makeshift tablet holster she'd fashioned out of a cereal box and duct tape. He parked outside the rust-stained storage facility just past the fence. Gary arrived a few minutes later in his truck, tools in tow. The three of them stood silently in front of the orange metal door, like they were staring at a locked tomb. Dean tapped on the roll-up with his knuckle. "I own this place," he muttered. "Not this unit, but the building. The club bought it 3 years ago. Some of the units are subleased. Randy handles the paperwork." "Can we get inside?" Gary asked. "Already called a locksmith. They didn't need one." Before Dean could say another word, the door rattled. A kid in a polo shirt stepped out, eyes wide, a clipboard clutched to his chest. He froze when he saw Dean and tried to pivot away. "Hold up," Dean said, stepping forward. The kid panicked and dropped the clipboard. Dean picked it up, thumbing through the paperwork. Storage Unit 14B. Rented under Iron Jaws Motorcycle Maintenance Fund. Authorized signature. A name no one recognized. He handed the form to Gary. "This is forged." "How can you tell?" Dean asked. "Because I built the database it references," Gary muttered. "This is a fake front. Someone made up a club subsidiary that doesn't exist." That's why they used a physical mail drop instead of a digital key. Lacey peered inside. Crates. 3 of them. Heavy, black, unmarked. One had a cracked lid, revealing a polished chrome bike muffler wrapped in plastic. She glanced at a packing tag and frowned. These shipping codes, they're wrong. Dean stepped beside her. Wrong how? They used the old formatting. We stopped using these letters in 2022. These are supposed to look like recent deliveries, but they're using outdated tags. Gary pulled out his phone and started snapping photos. This is a setup. They're planting stolen bike parts and paperwork that makes it look like we're trafficking. If this had stayed hidden, someone could have raided the garage and connected it to us. Dean's jaw tensed. He turned to Gary. Who'd have access to this kind of forgery? Who'd want us gone and know how to build something like this? Gary hesitated. Then he said a name, Preston Grant. Dean didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, the clubhouse was quiet. Only a few patch members remained, sprawled across chairs with old war stories and cold pizza. Lacey sat cross-legged near the back wall, drawing in a worn notebook someone had given her. Her notebook wasn't filled with flowers or stars. It showed wiring paths, floor layouts, and signal ranges like a blueprint drafted in crayon. Where'd you learn to do that? Randy asked, looking over her shoulder. She shrugged. I like puzzles. They make sense. People don't. He chuckled. Ain't that the truth? Gary and Dean sat in the office with the door slightly open. Their voices were low but urgent. You sure it's Preston? Dean asked. He owns 3 LLCs that lease properties near here. One of them is tied to a tech firm specializing in surveillance logistics. And someone's been greasing city council to rezone the park and this whole block. If the club loses legal status, Preston gets first rights. Dean rubbed his temples. He always said he wanted to clean up the block. I just didn't think he'd bury us to do it. You two knew each other? We were kids, Dean muttered. Built a motorbike together out of lawnmower parts. He took the college scholarship. I stayed here. Guess one of us chose wrong. Outside, Lacey kept drawing. But her ears were sharp. She heard every word. By the next morning, the club was different. A whiteboard had appeared near the garage entrance, covered in scribbles and times. Patrol shifts, plate numbers, delivery logs. Lacey had her own corner now, dubbed the nest. A high stool with a desk lamp and a toolkit someone donated. She wore noise-canceling headphones, not plugged into anything, just to help her focus. Gary helped install new internal cameras. But this time, they were the ones watching. Dean handed Lacey an old patch with an eagle stitched in red thread. You're not just probation anymore, he said. You're our scout. She beamed. And for the first time since it began, the iron jaws weren't reacting, they were preparing. Because someone tried to ghost them with wires and lies. But now, ghosts had faces. And soon, names. The trap wasn't loud. That was Dean's rule. No noise. No muscle. If someone's watching, we let them think we're sloppy. By midweek, the Iron Jaws garage looked exactly the way an outsider would hope it looked, careless. Toolboxes left open. A bike parked half-blocking the meeting table. A heated argument staged just loud enough to travel, just messy enough to feel real. Lacey knew it was an act. She also knew how convincing it looked. From her corner in the nest, she watched the new internal feeds Gary had installed. Clean angles. Hardwired. No wireless bleed. On a separate screen, Gary monitored signal traffic around the block, tracking any spike that didn't belong. Soon after 3 p.m., one appeared. Gary leaned closer to his monitor. We've got activity. Dean didn't move. He just nodded once and kept talking, deliberately louder now, leaning into the performance. A dispute about storage inventory. About parts that weren't logged right. The signal pulsed again. They're watching, Gary whispered. Lacey swallowed. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, eyes locked on the screen. Not fear, but something colder, sharper, like when the wind pauses before glass breaks. The spike didn't come from the storage unit. Came from across the street. Gas station, Lacey murmured. Look at the bounce. Gary followed her finger. You're right. That's not a server. That's a mobile relay. Dean's eyes narrowed. Someone local. They didn't move. That was the hardest part. 10 minutes later, a man stepped out of the gas station convenience store, phone pressed to his ear. He wore a delivery jacket with no logo and glanced toward the garage without turning his head. Lacey zoomed in. That's him, she said. The one who dropped the crates. I saw him last week. Gary checked the timestamp. He's talking while monitoring the feed. That's our confirmation. Dean leaned back against a bike, arms crossed. Who's he calling? Lacey listened. Not through the phone, through patterns. He keeps moving when things get louder, she said quietly. Like he's waiting for a mess. Dean smiled, slow and humorless. Let's give him what he wants. Inside the garage, the argument spiked. A chair scraped. A metal tool clattered to the floor. One of the younger bikers slammed his fist on the table, right where the original hidden camera had been aimed. Outside, the man stiffened. His phone call ended abruptly. He just cut the line, Gary said. Good, Dean replied. Means he's switching plans. They waited. 5 minutes passed. Then Lacey noticed something else. Dad, there's another signal. Not streaming. Just pinging. Gary frowned. That's not surveillance. Dean looked over. Then what is it? She hesitated. A trigger. Like a notification. He's alerting someone. At 4 p.m., a black sedan rolled slowly past the garage and didn't stop. Dean caught the plate number. Randy caught the look on Dean's face. Friends of yours? He asked. No, Dean said. But I know who they belong to. That night, the garage went dark. Lights off. Doors closed. Bikes gone. The iron jaws didn't vanish, they scattered. 2 blocks away, Gary sat in his truck with Lacey beside him, both of them watching the storage unit from across the street. Lacey had insisted on coming. If they move the parts, she said, we'll miss it. Then the sedan returned. 2 men exited. One rolled up the unit door. Lacey held her breath. They're rearranging the crates, she whispered. Taking pictures. They're trying to make it look active. Like the club's moving inventory at night. Gary started recording. Then headlights flooded the alley. Police. 3 cruisers. Too fast. Too clean. Dad, this isn't right, Lacey said. Gary cursed under his breath. They called it in. Inside the unit, one of the men panicked. He bolted. The other froze. Dean stepped out of the shadows. Hands raised. Calm. Waiting. The officers hesitated when they saw him. When they saw the crates already open. When they saw the timestamps on Gary's camera, running uninterrupted for hours. This isn't what it looks like, one of the officers muttered. Dean didn't smile. That's the point. By morning, statements were taken. Phones confiscated. One man was detained. The other wasn't so lucky. His call log led straight to a shell company under Preston Grant's umbrella. Still, no arrest was made. Not yet, because Preston hadn't shown his hand. And everyone in that garage knew it. Lacey sat on the curb afterward, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the empty unit. They almost won, she said softly. Dean crouched beside her. Almost doesn't count. She looked up. What now? Dean glanced toward City Hall in the distance, lights glowing even this late. Now, he said, we stop hiding. The council chamber smelled like old carpet and coffee no one drank. Rows of wooden benches lined the back wall, filled with a mix of city staff, residents, and 2 men in suits flipping legal pads with forced disinterest. Up front, the 5 council members sat in a semicircle under fluorescent lighting that made everything feel flatter than it was. Dean McCrae stood quietly in the second row. Next to him sat Gary, tie crooked, hands clasped. And between them, legs swinging off the edge of her chair, was Lacey. She wore her patched-up vest over a clean blue hoodie. Someone had ironed her jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, not because anyone asked her to, but because she said she wanted to look ready. The council president adjusted his microphone. Next on the agenda, Item 7C. Rezoning Proposal 1452B, submitted by the Grant Redevelopment Trust. Murmurs. On cue, Preston Grant stepped forward. Tanned, polished, in a tailored navy suit. He smiled like a man who had already counted the votes. Behind him, a tall assistant rolled out a printed blueprint of the proposed development. The glossy panels showed clean sidewalks, luxury apartments, bike paths. No trace of the Iron Jaws garage. No green space. No basketball hoops. No kids. This project, Preston began, represents a chance to revitalize a neglected part of Hawthorne. We've consulted with architects, sustainability experts, and local safety committees to ensure that. He paused as a group of men in black vests quietly entered the back of the room. Dean didn't look. He didn't need to. They weren't there to intimidate. They were there to witness. Lacey's fingers gripped the folder on her lap. Inside it were the photos, the timestamps, the signal trace map she'd helped Gary draw. Everything that mattered. The council president glanced at the audience. We've received a formal challenge to this proposal, claiming unlawful surveillance, falsified documentation, and attempted entrapment. A statement will be given. The room quieted. Dean stood. Then, to everyone's surprise, he didn't walk forward. He turned to Lacey. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded. Gary squeezed her shoulder once. "Go ahead, kiddo." The microphone was taller than she was. A city worker helped lower it. Her voice, when it came, was small but steady. "My name is Lacey Worthington. I'm 9. I live on Lemon Street, and I play at Hawthorne Park almost every day. The one you're about to erase." A few chuckled softly, but she didn't pause. "Last week, I found a hidden camera in the Iron Jaws garage. It wasn't theirs. It was aimed at their table, and it was sending video to a signal point by the gas station. My dad helped trace it. The stream bounced through a server used by a company owned by Mr. Grant." Preston shifted. She opened her folder, held up a photograph, a zoomed-in shot of the camera's lens, circled in red. Then another, the tracking diagram. Then the forged storage rental agreement. She didn't stumble. "I like puzzles," she said. "And I know when things don't add up. These papers were made to look like the motorcycle club was doing something wrong. But I was there. I watched. They were being framed." The assistant tried to interrupt. "Councilman, this child's testimony is backed by digital evidence," Gary said, standing. "I can confirm the technical details. I've submitted the device's firmware history and a report from an independent analyst. The camera was active, transmitting, and intentionally placed." Dean rose now too. "We also have recorded footage of 2 individuals altering the scene. One of them was on Mr. Grant's payroll until yesterday." The room shifted. Preston's smile faltered. One council member leaned into her mic. "Do you have this footage?" "Yes," Gary said, producing a USB drive. Preston stood, jaw tight. "This is a coordinated smear campaign. Manufactured outrage from a group with a history of, well, less than civic behavior." Dean tilted his head. "And yet somehow, you're the only one on record signing 3 leases under different shell companies tied to a project you were planning to approve." Silence. Then the youngest councilman, a quiet man with a salt and pepper beard, looked up. "I was at that park last weekend," he said. "Watched a girl fall off the monkey bars. 3 bikers were there before the parents even stood up." No one responded, but something shifted in the room. The vote was delayed. The footage was reviewed. And 2 days later, Preston Grant was arrested for conspiracy, fraud, and unlawful surveillance. The development deal collapsed. Weeks later, Hawthorne Park looked the same, but it felt different. The basketball net had new chain links. The grass was patchy but freshly cut. And the Iron Jaws garage had a fresh coat of paint, a mural across one wall showing a girl pointing upward at a beam. No face, just her arm and the caption underneath, "Look closer." Dean was back under the hood of a bike. Randy was teaching a teenager how to sand a gas tank. Gary had finally fixed the flickering overhead light. And Lacey? She sat on her stool in the nest, drawing again. Only this time she wasn't diagramming circuits. She was sketching a new layout, half garage, half learning lab. A space for fixing things and figuring things out. Thinking of expanding? Gary asked, leaning over her shoulder. Maybe. He looked at her with pride he no longer tried to hide. You changed a lot of lives, Lace. She smiled. I just saw what was already there. Dean passed behind them, slow, deliberate, a paper bag in one hand. He set it gently on the workbench beside Lacey. Inside was a pair of clear lens safety goggles, a badge-shaped patch with a red eagle, and a keychain shaped like a wrench. Scout, it read. You didn't just help us, Dean said quietly. You reminded us why we're here. She ran her thumb over the word Scout like it might fade. Her eyes stayed dry, but her breath caught just once. This story reminds us, sometimes a child sees what grown-ups forget to notice. Not just cameras, but truth, loyalty, and what's worth protecting. If you were in Lacey's shoes, would you have spoken up? Comment below and tell us. And if you believe small voices can spark big change, like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that stay with you. See you in our next video.